Should be going live shortly. All right, there we are. Good morning, good evening, and good night. I have to turn my light on, but you guys can still see me. It's going to be a great episode here. We are having a great week. What's going on, fellas? I kind of botched that intro, but we're going to run with it. We're going to see. Thanks for everybody in the chat going on right now. What's up?
Yeah, I thought it was fine, man. The intro was great. I don't know why you playing yourself down. But yeah, we got a bunch of cool news here to talk about, so super exciting. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Happy Memorial Day to everybody out there celebrating. We'll be making some burgers, some dogs, maybe drink a little whiskey tonight. So it's gonna be a good day.
Yeah, we got a lot of good news to touch on. We got some stats to go through from last week. You guys had an amazing episode with BlockFi, and it's really gone a little bit viral in the crypto space. We're getting a lot of love from it. A lot of people are hopping in for the first time into Layer 1. So we're happy to have new people in the channel as well. So welcome everybody. Shun's in the chat. Ivan commented like 30 minutes prior to the episode saying he was first. So making sure that he got that first comment. And so what's up, guys that are rolling in the chat here? Other than that, we have stats, I think, to the left of me here, or I guess to the right of me, but your left is going to be our column of what we're talking about today. So we're going to start here with some breaking news. We're going to hit discussion pieces. We're going to do Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS, and Cardano today. I didn't know that was Cardano's logo for the longest time. I had to really find that one. But that's what we're talking about today. And as you guys go along and you're following along, please comment on what you want us to talk about today. So those are always fun topics. But yeah, man, how did you guys like that BlockFi interview?
It was great. Yeah, it was great. Zach, obviously it was the day after they had that data breach, so I think he was a bit stressed when he first showed up, but kind of got rolling with us, and it ended up being a lot of fun. He was trying to get me on a little bit of a scammy bet, as you guys saw, but I shut that down real quick. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was definitely a great interview. I like all the things that he shares, in terms of insight from what they see from lending. That's absolutely like my favorite subject to kind of talk about, and how it ripples through the rest of the market. So
love it. Kieran's in the chat now. Yeah, that BlockFi episode was amazing, man. I had to clip that specific portion. I think Mike told me about it previous, but yeah, we had a good time. I had a good time editing it. So yeah, guys, filling in the chat. Appreciate it. I think we got up to 9 or 10 now, so we appreciate you guys filling in. I want to get to stats here, and then we're gonna touch on some people that joined the private Telegram group here and give them a shout out. But stats have stayed pretty much the same as far as top 5 countries by listens. We got US, we got Australia, UK, Germany, and Canada. We've got top 3 episodes. Obviously, BlockFi is absolutely killing it right now. I think we almost have like 1,500 views and listens over all platforms. We've got we've got that OpenSea, which is that NFT marketplace, and then we have staking facilities coming in at 3rd. Upcoming guests this week, we've got Ava Labs, we've got Komodo, and we've got Roll. So that's going to be back to back. Somebody's breathing into their mic. I don't think I can kind of hear you. I don't know, but
stop breathing.
Yeah, stop breathing the whole time. But yeah, guys, that's what we got as far as the stats from this week. I want to shout out some guys from the Telegram group. Mike Rogers joined. We got a ton of mics now. Dre Strauss has been commenting in our chat. Obviously, Kat has been an active member of that Telegram group. We got Manos from Block Move. Obviously, Kieran, Shun's in that chat as well. I believe Shun's in that chat. Omar.com. So we're really filling out that Telegram group. Guys, if you want to have access to this Telegram group and you think you can provide the group a little value as far as crypto is concerned, whether that's memes, whether that's information, whether that's things going on within crypto, you can join the public group, which is in the description below, and then see what happens, and maybe we can get you a DM to that private group that we are building out slowly. So we appreciate everybody in there. Other than that, do you guys have anything else before we hop into breaking news here?
Nope.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So we've got the first breaking news here. It's going to be Craig Wright called a fraud on a Bitcoin signed message on addresses he claimed to be owning. So obviously, the ongoing court case between him and the Klymans is going on. And basically what you have here is the Klymans documents that were pseudo leaked and kind of had those Bitcoin addresses leaked. Well, one of those addresses or multiple amounts of those addresses had this signed message over the last 24 hours. It says Craig Stephen Wright is a liar and a fraud. He doesn't have the keys used to sign this message. The Lightning Network is a significant achievement. However, we need to continue working on improving on-chain capacity. Unfortunately, the solution is not just to change a constant in the code or to allow powerful participants to force out others. We are all Satoshi. So basically Bitcoin addresses, which Craig Wright submitted to the court to say that he owned these Bitcoin addresses, that has been signed by someone that seems to be other than Craig Wright. So that is the breaking news. What do you guys think about that?
I just can't wait until this drama is going to end. Man, it's like back and forth, continues to make headlines. It's, come on, guys. Like, all right, let's put this away. We kind of know what the deal is.
Yeah, I can't imagine he's not going to lose this. I mean, he's just, he might even go to jail over obstruction of justice or perjury or so many of the other things that are going on in that court case. So this is kind of this is the very end of the battle here when, kind of the other army's commander is like getting ready to be killed, kind of thing. If we're talking Game of Thrones or a movie, so yeah, hopefully this is close to the end of the last that we hear from Craig Wright.
Boom. Well, that's pretty much the breaking news we had for today. Something that broke overnight that we're not really going to touch on, but it looks like there's like a hacker that might have gotten private information from Trezor, I believe Ledger was the other one, and KeepKey Wallet, as well as MetaMask. So that's pretty much all of the public-facing wallets that you'll see out there, and they claim to have hacked that wallet. We're not going to touch on it really, but it was a breaking news that I wanted to touch. Everybody's getting in here commenting on BSV. Looks like they want some more BSV information. We'll bring it hot to you next week. But anyways, go ahead, Dimitri. We got quick news.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So first piece of news that I got here is Tether hits number 3 by market cap and falls below $1 for longest stretch since March. So if you guys have noticed, Tether climbed in market cap and now it took over XRP. Can you imagine that? Tether obviously, spoke about it multiple times. These guys had the first mover advantage when it comes to stable coins and provides the specific tool when it comes to having the peg to the dollar and having the kind of the liquidity there when it comes to trading certain products on platforms like Bittrex, FTX, and so on. So there was a pretty big demand for Tether because just kind of us coming out of the current market conditions where a lot of people get into stable coins, and we saw stable coins overall just kind of pick up. And that, didn't leave out Tether. So Tether overall picked up in terms of demand, and therefore the market cap for it picked up as well. Now, the reason why, they're saying Tether kind of dipped below $1 is because they're saying, hey, people are now rotating out of Tether into, let's say, BTC or some of the other products. So it's always interesting to see the kind of like the movement, between the stable coins, especially, Tether, that it's been around for so long, and see how that kind of relates to the overall market perception in terms of risk on, risk off environment. Lots of things are happening there. There's also the next piece of news that kind of ties into it is the FTX token launches with a Coinbase custody after expanding to US via spot exchange. So FTX is coming to US. That's crazy. I would never, kind of think that would happen, because kind of just, FTX has been a pretty big speculation house where they do a bunch of creative stuff in terms of, allowing people to speculate on many different things when it comes to elections, when it comes to like all kinds of stuff. So they create a product, just on whatever the theme is in the market right now, and they want to capture those speculators there. But the interesting stuff is that Coinbase has announced that it will provide custody services for the exchange token of Binance-backed crypto derivative platform FTX on May 22nd. And overall, FTX now is getting the licenses in order to operate in US. So they're going to have like FTX US branch, kind of like Binance US. So they're getting their documentation together to get a green light from regulators from New York specifically, and other states and so on. They applied for the BIT license for the New York based traders. So FTX is kind of moving along, and it's interesting because I guess Binance does have a piece right there, or if they don't actually outright acquired FTX, but it's interesting to see them entering the U.S. market and trying to capture some of the U.S. traders. The thing there is just it's going to be spot, right? So we're not going to see some crazy ridiculous derivatives contracts where you can speculate on like elections and or other things, So just keep that in mind. But another exchange is trying to enter U.S. market. And then the last piece of news for me in regards to Russia. So Russia came out, and Russia seeks to criminalize crypto usage with fines and imprisonment. So there's basically a bill that's being pushed around in Russia that's saying, hey, listen, if you're operating, a crypto company, or you have your wallet that is not registered with the authorities, and basically people, the government doesn't know how much crypto you have and how you spend it, then that's kind of a violation of this new rule that's coming into play. So they're trying to lay that out and have kind of the enforcement there. If you do get to violate it, there's multiple different tiers of fines that you get to pay. It's different fines for individuals and different fines for entities. But it's crazy because like if you get caught, and there's a possibility that you can go to prison for 7 years, for not going alongside these laws that they're trying to introduce. So there's just another piece of news kind of showing you, hey, when things are slowing down, when you have let's say local currency like Russian ruble is struggling, people might be looking for a way to kind of get out of that currency and get into dollar or get into crypto and so on, to hedge out the inflation risk and all the economic hardship that's essentially people are experiencing. So they're trying to kind of close down those loopholes as they're kind of tightening the restrictions and regulations and so on in the country to prevent kind of ruble from escalating in terms of getting dumped on. So I thought it was pretty interesting piece of news just to see kind of, we're seeing that all kind of across the globe with other countries as well, where you have more regulations coming in, where people like the government wants to know, all right, how much are you holding, where are you holding, where is that going, and so on, all these things that the government wants to monitor, so there's no shady stuff going on.
Got it. All right. Well, I got the next piece of quick news, but before I get to that, guys, we missed one piece of information. We do kind of want to have your guys' opinion on when we should actually be hosting Layer1Live. So if you did make it this far into the video, or if you're actually live now, please let us know in the comments what time would actually work for Layer1Live. And then I do want to shout out guys in the comments. Kieran's talking about Dimitri breaking down BSV. We got Ivan is short BSV. Shun's talking about Craig Wright, and Manuel just joined the chat. So appreciate you guys following along. Couple quick pieces of news here on Tezos. Tezos has reached over 80% staked. A lot of that is held by large wallets, mostly exchanges. That's going to be 18%, I believe, or 11% by Coinbase, and another 13% month to month. So what we're seeing on Tezos right now is an increase in staking ratio, which actually is, pretty solid when you look at like different protocol networks. Like there's a lot, I believe Tron or something like that has like 20% staked across total supply. You do see like a lower yield based on kind of the staking ratio increasing, but having a network as secure as 80 to 90% of total supply staked to Tezos is going to be something that's good. Maybe, I guess you can make the argument that exchanges maybe having all the control there, or large whale users maybe isn't the best thing to have, but as far as like a total number, 80 to 90% staked across the network is going to be pretty solid. So that's pretty much it as far as the Tezos staking percentage. There's another bit of Tezos news, I guess. A large investment bank in Latin America is launching a REIT, or a security token on Tezos. They're moving from Ethereum to Tezos, and they're putting about, and I guess they bought 323 units of land, but they're also, kind of formalizing this partnership and coming out and saying REIT BZ is launching on, Tezos. I think they're going to test out this network. I think they like the security, aforementioned security that I talked about with the percentage staked on the network, but they're looking to continue to roll out STOs as far as REIT goes, or as far as REITs go, on the Tezos blockchain in Brazil. So should be nice. And then the last piece of news that I have is you can auto buy now, and you can dollar cost average for BTC on the Square Cash app. So that's pretty standard news there. You can go into Square, and that's good for the new people getting into crypto as well. You can go in there and kind of set up a reoccurring buy of BTC on Square. So Jack continues pushing BTC adoption, and we'll see where it goes from there.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So I got the last 4 stories here as far as quick news goes before we jump into discussion. The first one, we got some updates on the TBTC issues that the Keep network had. So, just if you kind of as some context, if you haven't heard, the Keep network's new TBTC, basically, their goal of bringing BTC to Ethereum's DeFi network went through a team triggered pause. I think it was last week. It was, relatively breaking news when we talked about it last Layer1Live, and they didn't really necessarily talk about what the issue was immediately, but they've kind of put out this post-mortem as they said they would as of May 19th. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, read essentially what happened and then kind of go through and briefly explain it here. So it says, the team triggered this pause after finding a significant issue in the redemption flow of deposit contracts that put signer bonds for open deposits at risk of liquidation when certain types of Bitcoin addresses were used in redemption. So without any context, that really makes no sense. But essentially the way that it works is if you are an Ethereum DeFi user and you want to mess with TBTC, you have to put up 150% collateral in ETH in order to get, whatever relevant amount of TBTC you want. So in doing that, you basically deposit this ETH, again, 150% collateral, which acts as a bond for the, the swap and the receiving of the TBTC. So essentially what they found was that as this process was occurring, there was a risk of liquidation based on certain types of Bitcoin addresses that were used when the actual redemption happened, right? So if you put up, 1.5 ETH in exchange for, or, however much ETH relative to 1 TBTC, and then you go and you want to redeem your TBTC for actual BTC, there was a risk of liquidation with that Ethereum bond. So, they basically paused it. There was really only one user kind of testing this out. So fundamentally, it's really not a big deal for Keep Network. Obviously, the larger issue is kind of the potential trust they've lost. But, with all the hacking and the various issues that DeFi has had, they're not far out of bounds there. So they don't have another date yet of relaunch, but Matt Luongo and the team have basically said they'll keep everybody posted as they kind of go through and do some better audits and understand better, kind of the where the issues may lie and how to avoid them in the future. So interesting update there. We'll keep you guys posted. Next piece of news here is the very large OTC provider Genesis Capital, who is based out of New York but has offices all around the globe, has acquired Volt, which is a smaller crypto custodian. They only have about 6 employees, but according to the Genesis CEO Michael Morrow, he's pretty impressed by kind of what they've been going on, what they have going on the tech side, and I would imagine kind of their general business. So they've acquired Volt, and this is important because it moves what has traditionally been an OTC provider, someone who works with big blocks, buying and selling, with more high net worth individuals. They're moving into the custody game, which a lot of people are theorizing will move them closer to becoming a prime broker. Prime brokerage on the institutional side is kind of the next big, kind of expanse that these larger crypto companies are trying to take over. So they'll compete with Tagomi and a handful of others who are trying to, Fidelity is a big one, who are trying to become the largest prime broker in the space. So congrats to Genesis there. Congrats to Michael Morrow. I know that's a big move for them, and I'm sure it'll work out well. Unfortunately, kind of on the more bearish side, we've got another Chinese crypto scam. So Plus Token has been in the news for some time. A lot of people theorize that the various kind of quick dumps in price have been from the Plus Token folks selling their Bitcoin. And there's yet another one here with about 700 users getting scammed out of about $1 billion worth of tokens. So this is called WO token, WO token. Very similar to Plus Token to the degree that even one of the people who was involved with Plus Token was involved with WO token. It's saying that these 6 folks who have scammed these people out of this money are going to serve prison time between 6 months and 11 years. So
that's a big range.
Yeah, quite the range. It obviously brings up the question of kind of, if the punishment can be that small, like why not just keep doing it, right? As we saw with this Plus Token guy. So there's going to be quite a bit of BTC, quite a bit of ETH. It's looking like about 46,000 BTC, more than 2 million Ethereum, 56,000 Bitcoin Cash, 292,000 Litecoin, and 684,000 EOS were stolen in this scam. So, unfortunately, that's something that's kind of plagued the Chinese crypto market, and hopefully it's something that can get under control in the future. And then finally here, some good news for those of you following Uniswap, or those of you working with essentially the Uniswap liquidity pool setups that they have there. Version 2.0 has come out. They've added price oracles, what they're calling flash swaps, which is very similar to another DeFi protocol's flash loans that you see on DYDX. And then also, in order to ensure that there's a smooth transition from version 1 to version 2, what they're calling a liquidity migration tool, where everybody who's participating in version 1 of Uniswap will be able to very easily merge over and hit version 2 there. So congrats to the Uniswap team there. They're one of the DeFi projects really kind of leading the space there with some pretty unique concepts, and they seem to be constantly iterating. So again, congrats to the Uniswap team.
Amazing. Well, that's going to do it for quick news. Guys, if you want to hear different types of news that you think we should be talking about each week, networks we should be covering, please, comment in the comment section. Let us know. There is some comments going along the lines of Celsius and BlockFi in the comment section. So I don't know, Dima, do you want to hit those comments really quick?
Yeah. So Kieran's saying, I think it was Kieran. Oh, no, how was it? Manuel is saying that the Cell token is pumping. So the thing is with that, with Celsius, is that the way it's kind of made, Mashinsky, what he does is he purchases these tokens right at at a certain time when they make profit for Celsius. So it's kind of a similar model to kind of BNB is, and overall kind of sell.
He purchases it to pay out interest and sell.
Yeah.
The way that works.
Yeah. It's similar to BlockFi, but BlockFi is more a little bit on the institutional side, where Celsius is a little bit more for the retail side when it comes to just kind of the market share that they have. But Celsius has a token and BlockFi doesn't.
Yeah, man. Well, if you want to check out, we actually had an interview with Alex Mashinsky probably, 3-4 months ago? Shit, that time flies. But we did have that interview with Alex Mashinsky from Celsius that you could take a look at and see the differences between the two, man. See, also, I think you could see, Dima, I thought that we were the dynamic duo. I thought that was like special with us. And then I go on BlockFi's episode and I hear the dynamic duo is actually used across episodes, across people.
Oh,
so
no.
you actually were found out, but the other dynamic duo actually did that Celsius interview. So we should have a good time there.
You guys are the dynamic duo. Don't worry.
We got combinations here. But so we've got Kieran in the chat talking about RIP, no more pump for me. He sold his sell tokens a month back. But everybody in the chat, we're actually going to move into discussion as you see here. I've got Tron and Steem It news. Obviously, we've been following the Tron and Steem It debacle for a long time here. So, Justin is now going to freeze 5 million worth of funds from Steem users who are the dissenters or are like making problems on his network. I think in his words, I believe they're using malicious activity. So they're going to see some users' accounts that actually performed in these illegal activities. So, you also have kind of Hive on one side actually freezing or like stealing almost Steem, or I believe it's Hive tokens that were going to be airdropped to certain Steem accounts, and they actually took that to the Hive blockchain and put it into a DAO format so that it can be used by whoever's being used over there. So what you have here is kind of like a push and pull between this Steem and Hive network. We've been covering it for a long time. I guess the discussion piece would be around who's right, as well as like who ends up kind of victorious here, and there might not be a quick answer to what is going on between Steem and Hive. But essentially what you have is Justin freezing funds, the Hive users kind of taking Hive tokens that were supposedly supposed to be airdropped to a certain account and moved to the Hive network and put into a DAO pool so that those users can do what they will with them. So what do you guys think? There's two sides here, but what do you think about this conflict?
Well, I mean, in general, this is a very terrible acquisition process, but, it's just like the Steem community, the whole point of kind of doing the acquisition so you can actually attract the users with it, right? So like the community and everything. So you need to make everything peachy, but this seems to go like the complete other way, so a lot of the community that's being acquired, they're obviously not happy and start doing all this stuff to try to debunk it and so on. So it's really not like I don't know how much of a value will it actually present to Justin, after this kind of whole thing blows over, right? After it's done, because there's so many resources and so many things that have been dedicated to be able to make this happen, and all these issues that are happening, and people fighting back and so on, which is essentially a cost. So at the end of the day, it's like, well, was it worth it then, once it's all done, because like it seems like it's really kind of like really draining on Tron and Justin and so on, and both sides. I think both sides are just like not benefiting from this at all. So I don't know how long it's going to continue to happen, but it seems like both sides still have no chill.
Yeah, it's this is obviously not worked out well for Justin. I don't really know how this ends necessarily. Maybe it's just kind of a war back and forth. It seems like Hive has much less to lose than Steem and Justin Sun. I mean, obviously there was some sort of deal behind the scenes, some sort of acquisition that went on. But at some point, as I kind of like look back at a lot of the various acquisitions and projects that Tron is working on, and thus Justin Sun is working on, like at what point does it get to a state where there's too much chaos for him to manage, and it just kind of all gets thrown away, right? Like even if you look at the most recent acquisition before Steem It in Poloniex, I mean it's just there's really no volume. It's gotten completely roasted on crypto Twitter. And it's just kind of become this exchange where he can list all of the various tokens that he's coming out with. We'll see how the JST token does. I know they did an airdrop a few days ago. But as more and more chaos continues to happen, and as he kind of, continues to burn bridges, especially with CZ in this case, right? That was a big story, and that him and CZ were boys for some time. And now CZ is even publicly on Twitter kind of talking shit about Justin Sun or to Justin Sun. I don't know how you go forward with this acquisition model and expect good things to come about.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be kind of a war of attrition where they're slowly, both sides are going to lose over time. The point you made about CZ's fair too. I think CZ's gotten caught up in all this. This has to be a hard fork, correct? Because you're actually like freezing a certain amount of funds, so you're actually having this hard fork, and Binance gets caught in the middle. So now Binance has to come out and say we actually have to support this hard fork, or else users won't be able to move their funds on this new network. So I think that was tactful by him. He had to come out and say this that he can play both sides in that sense, where he's supporting what's happening with Steem going forward, but also kind of giving himself like more of the community vibe of saying, hey, but you guys can hard fork on top of this, and we might be able to. I think he goes on to say like we might be able to support that in the future if the community does fork like Hive did. So yeah, it's an interesting conflict here. I think there is no winner. The interesting point to point out too, man, is that like the Hive is kind of a cartel. Like people have been using this cartelization of Justin Sun and how he took over the network and all these things, but Hive is essentially the same thing, maybe a little bit more decentralized than what has Tron and what Justin Sun is, where you have that top down leadership, but you still had a small group of people making the decisions for the vast majority of people, and I think that gets lost. We all think like Steem was this like super decentralized platform. That wasn't the case. Neither is Hive. So I think we should continuously make that aware to the people that just like have this utopian vision of what Steem or Hive is, and we'll see what happens going forward. We have OX Factor. He said absolutely, it's a lose-lose for both. Good news for projects like Mines and Uptrend though. Yeah, I wonder how Mines is doing. We heard about that way back in the day. It's like the decentralized Twitter platform. So, OX, go ahead.
He was just on the Joe Rogan podcast a little while ago.
Oh, wow.
The Mines guy?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
I mean, maybe last year. Maybe not recently, but yeah, he was there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I have the next discussion piece here. Obviously, kind of this wave of institutions coming to crypto, if you will, has been a big topic over the last few weeks or few months here, as we saw Paul Tudor Jones come out with a paper talking about how this is the time for inflation finally, and that Bitcoin will act in a lot of the same ways that gold does when we see this inflationary landscape start to emerge. And the Block reported that Goldman Sachs is going to be not necessarily jumping into crypto, but at least talking about Bitcoin on a call that they have for May 27th, which is going to be on Wednesday. There was a paper that the Block's Mike Dudas, essentially revealed that's called Implications of Current Policies for Inflation, Gold, and Bitcoin. And again, it's obviously by Goldman Sachs. So kind of the first response to this was very bullish. And now as people kind of go through it and look back through Goldman Sachs' various kind of, attempts at getting into Bitcoin, some are, kind of pulling back and maybe feeling a little more neutral on it. So if you were with us back in, I think it was 2017, 2018, there's some big news around Goldman Sachs basically setting up a trading desk for Bitcoin and for crypto. They were going to aim for, I think it was maybe spring 2018, but the news broke in 2017, I think. And that was a really kind of fundamentally bullish event for crypto, because it was going to be a trading desk outside of just, the standard CME or CBOE at the time that was trading Bitcoin for your more institutional or more regulated participants. So that was bullish. they haven't really done much since, maybe some kind of smaller news pieces that I've missed. But, it's important to note that their CIO, Sharmin Mosver-Ramani, I hope, hopefully I was close there. He has not necessarily been bullish on Bitcoin as an investment in the past. In 2018, or excuse me, in 2018, she believed and said that crypto does not fulfill any of the three traditional roles of a currency. And it's hard to imagine, at least in my opinion, that is going to kind of fundamentally change. Now, however, the bullish piece of this, I think, is that as Paul Tudor Jones has come out and laid out this essentially investment philosophy for crypto, I think we now have an example of a very prominent macro investor who is kind of giving the okay for your less prominent investors or your clients who now are interested in getting into Bitcoin, interested in learning about crypto. And I think that's probably where Goldman Sachs inviting these clients to this call comes from. Just kind of, generally going over the macro landscape, what they see happening over the next few years. Is there a fear of inflation? What's the risk of deflation? Could we even get to stagflation? And I think in general, it probably shows less of Goldman jumping in and buying spot Bitcoin, right? But more of the fact that they are seeing a large interest in at least understanding how Bitcoin could fit in as a tool, understanding kind of the macro landscape that we see today. So, I want to pitch this to you guys basically as a question of, understanding the way that institutions are coming in, right? They're not FOMO buying. They're generally not buying spot Bitcoin. They're generally participating on futures exchanges like the CME, where really it's the only place they can't participate unless they want to run the ARB on Grayscale's Bitcoin Trust. So the question would be, are institutions coming in bullish, bearish, neutral for crypto, right? A little bit of both. What do you guys think?
Let me go first.
You got the Wolf of Wall Street shirt on. Go ahead.
No, it's the Wolf of Wall Street. I think so. Just kind of going back to Goldman, when you mentioned about the desk that they were gonna get set up, they eventually, decided that they want to take part in crypto through, like a company that they spin off, like, Circle and so on, right? Where they created the stable coin. So they've been having exposure to crypto just kind of in general. But now, obviously, with Paul getting into the game, and Zach had actually a really good comment about it on a BlockFi interview where he said, there's people that religiously follow, Paul, like, and what he does in terms of like speak about his investments, kind of like similar to like the Warren Buffett and so on, which, what he said is that's going to bring a pretty big crowd of people into, Bitcoin, because he made those statements. And I think overall, from like the Goldman side and like from other bank sides, they're seeing that a lot of their clients are starting to talk about this. Hey, listen, I need, exposure to this, because in case the inflation is going to start picking up because of the things that are going on, I want to have the exposure and the hedge to that inflation, and if you guys don't have it, then guess what? I'm going to go to a different shop, and they're going to get my business, right? So that's really going to be kind of that race for the market share in general, especially when we have, big figures coming out and saying that, hey, listen, I'm putting 10% of my portfolio into Bitcoin, that's pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in general, like all these guys and all these things are happening in terms of like, we have the structure there, what you explained, like right now we have the CME, right? We have the Grayscale as well, where you can gain exposure for like institutional guys. But that's kind of just like the surface bottom layer, right? It's kind of where we are now. But once we start getting like something like Goldman, others getting in, it'll be interesting to see how they're going to structure that exposure for their clients. Is it going to be just cash based? Is it going to be physically based? And like how is it? Is it going to be a derivative contract, whatnot? So the details are going to be very key there. So I think the call is going to be, Yeah, I hope they release the notes in terms of like what was discussed on the call. But when Goldman talked about that they don't see kind of Bitcoin as a form of payments or a currency, which is kind of true in our industry, because I think it's getting more classified as a commodity that you would hold as a hedge against inflation. It's not necessarily a transactional type of currency that you would use to pay for things. It's actually kind of like the store of value thing, right? Where you hedge your potential inflation that's going to come, and we obviously know that how much is being printed right now. But in regards to Grayscale, I want to also mention there's another article that just came out where it's saying that Grayscale is buying Bitcoin at record rates, 29.9 million per week, and it's growing, which is insane. Basically, they've been buying 2/3 of all supply of newly minted Bitcoin in the 100 days before May 17th, which is insane. So that just kind of shows you the demand, right, from the institutional guys.
That's at a premium too, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they want to have exposure, right, to BTC, and you can see that by Grayscale is just ramping up in terms of people just trying to get into their trust. And it's funny because on Twitter somebody pointed out that the average weekly investment of Q1 2019 for Grayscale was 3.2 million, and now in 2020 Q1 the average weekly investment is 29.9 million. So like the pickup is significant, right? And you can see that just like the institutional people are starting to get in more and more in it. And it's funny because then the reply of basically the founder, I believe it's the founder, Barry Silbert of Grayscale, said, just wait until you see Q2, which is, pretty much he's saying like, they're looking to, get more and more interest for people to gain exposure in Bitcoin. But also like, another thing that I want to mention is that these guys, like, right, that are getting in to hedge inflation, right? I think a lot of retail guys that look at this and like, oh, okay, this is it. Time to buy Bitcoin. It's going to the moon. I'm going to 50x leverage, look, all these legitimate players are getting in. But what they don't understand is that these guys are getting in for a longer term, right? They're looking to get exposure for potential inflation that's going to come in the next 1 to 2, 3 years. They want to have that exposure. They want to hold that once the inflation starts picking up later on. But in a shorter period of time, Bitcoin can definitely experience volatility. That's something that probably a lot of people don't understand, that even though we are seeing institutional guys that are getting in, but these guys don't really care about the short-term volatility. They only, care, what is going to be the outlook, maybe 3 to 5 years as they have exposure to BTC. So, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your guys' talk with Zach from BlockFi in the stablecoin talk. And I know that's kind of like off topic of the actual question, but like you guys really made me think about like stablecoins as opposed to Bitcoin for, people, even institutions overseas that are trying to get into USD. I always thought, hey, Bitcoin's the way to go. But when we talk about store of values as it pertains to Bitcoin's not as good a store of value as we maybe thought we wanted it to be. We saw that big sell-off in March and what happened, and it's like, how can something that drops 40% in that amount of time be considered a strong store of value? So it's interesting to me that stable coins could almost replace that narrative for people overseas that are trying to get into something other than their currency. I always thought Bitcoin was the answer, right? It's going to be in Africa. It's going to be in all these distressed countries. Well, stable coins can be that answer without the volatility that you see in Bitcoin. So from like an institutional standpoint, I don't know how that works with overseas that when you see institutions trying to get into USD as well. As far as our shores, I wonder how much of COVID was a catalyst to all this. Like, when would Goldman Sachs have had this call if COVID never happened? That would be like one of my big questions. I think in general I'm bullish. I would actually like to hear the bearish case for the current holders of Bitcoin for institutions getting in? Like, what's the bearish case in that scenario? Like, where's the negative of these big institutions pouring all of this capital into Bitcoin when I'm already a current holder of the asset?
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, right? Like the GBTC trust, right? There's a premium that exists with it. That premium's getting smaller and smaller, but there's some details, there's some structure of the trust that people don't talk about, right? So, for example, the first one is that because of this premium, there's essentially this risk-free arbitrage that various hedge funds can run, right? And while GBTC is available to retail investors, Grayscale has basically shown that the majority of the interest is coming from these institutional investors, right? So like you said, I think a lot of people are saying, oh, Barry Silbert included, right? Are saying, oh, wow, look at this, look at all this institutional money coming in, when really from the things that I've seen and the things that I've heard, the majority of it is literally just hedge funds going short the trust and buying the fairly priced Bitcoin via a CME, right? So there's kind of this risk-free arbitrage that you can use there. And pull some alpha out. The other thing is that evidently there's generally a 1-year lockup period where these shares cannot be sold, within that 1-year lockup period. There's kind of some over-the-counter markets that can help out, but there's this kind of liquidity cycle of sorts that happens where unless these investors are selling shares in these OTC markets, and because Grayscale doesn't provide any sort of redemption service for BTC, about every year as that lockup period ends, the premium is just absolutely crushed, right? So I'm reading an article here where Nick Carter, who's a pretty famous, kind of talking head within crypto Twitter and is in the know with this kind of stuff. He says that I'd be willing to bet that the GBTC premium will be crushed single digits on the week of July 15th, 2020 and October 21st, 2020. Basically meaning that as this, 1-year lockup period is finished, people will sell the GBTC and lower that premium. So, there's always been kind of this crazy 50% premium. And I think that for me, the biggest bearish case is that, and it's hard to even say this is bearish, which I'll get to, but the biggest bearish case is that people assume when institutions come in that they are just buying spot Bitcoin and holding it, right? I think people also assume that inflation is a much greater risk than it actually is. And you have, very educated people talking about this, as well as mostly a large group of retail folks who are just kind of buying into a money printer meme. When we haven't really seen any significant amount of inflation risk for like 15 or 20 years. That's not to say that like the Fed is a good thing or their, modern monetary theory is going to work. But that would kind of be the bearish case there, as institutional money comes in. I think because Bitcoin has been driven by speculation, because the narrative has changed so much, that when you have more sophisticated money coming in who, like I said, aren't buying Bitcoin spot, you're going to end up with a price that's a lot more steady. You're not going to see the 10x, 50x, 100x gains that you used to be able to see with Bitcoin when there wasn't even a stable coin you could trade it into, right? So
then you move down to Ethereum. That's all. It's just down the line. Then you move into smaller. It's interesting that you, bring that point up, because when you have like, and I use your term talking heads, I'm sure they wouldn't like it, but we're using it. Talking heads like Pomp talking about money printer go burr and things like that. So you're saying all of this, inflation and all of this money printing isn't going to lead to some negative like effect on, the purchasing power of like average Americans and all these things that we're hearing, from guys like Pomp and I think Kling did follow his line of thinking, but are you saying that there's not going to be some negative effect that we're hearing?
Inflation's always a risk, and when you increase the money supply at the rate that the Fed has, right, it just kind of theoretically increases that risk. But other than making venture investments, Pomp's job is to get people to listen to his podcasts, right?
That's
so
fair.
like if I hold Bitcoin and the new narrative is that Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation, then I'm going to push whatever I can, to get people to come and listen to my podcast. And maybe that's a cynical way to look at it, but if you were to sit down with a Kling or with a Pomp or with any of these guys and actually have an educated discussion with them about the risks of deflation versus inflation, I would bet every single one of them would be more scared of deflation than they are inflation based on the actual economic metrics that are out there right now. And that's kind of a whole larger discussion to get into, but that would be the bearish case. Now, it's hard to say it's bearish though, because Bitcoin has been generally driven by it's generally retail driven, right? It's a retail phenomenon. So even if inflation doesn't happen, if we have more and more new blood coming into the space, buying and holding Bitcoin at a time where, when the supply is much lower because Grayscale's buying it or, whatever the case may be, then naturally the price is going to increase and you're going to kind of have this self-fulfilling narrative, even if it's not really kind of based in reality. So it's a matter of, do you play the Ukrainian bear and say, hey, this narrative really is not going to play out over the next 2 to 3 years? Or do you play the retail bull and say, well, it doesn't matter because everybody's buying into this meme anyway. So, kind of choose wisely there, I guess.
Yeah, I like that name drop for Ukrainian bear. But yeah, so also, an interesting thing that Zach from BlockFi mentioned too about what you said, the stable coins, right, and access to stable coins in, let's say, distressed countries. It's kind of an interesting, he gave us an interesting perspective where some of those countries might get, basically what he called like dollarized whatnot, basically.
But they're a colony now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, which is like kind of a risk for those countries. So that was definitely a really interesting point there. But in general, in regards to the inflation and deflation, so given where US is right now, because of global reserve currency, we export a lot of our inflation overseas. So so that inflation, if it should hit, then it's probably going to take some time to happen. But I agree with Mike in terms of like these guys are. There's a lot of information that's getting pushed around from where like, hey, institutional guys are getting in, they're trying to hedge inflation and so on. But like a lot of people don't understand the arbitrage that's happening with Grayscale, right? The opportunities that they see there. And nobody is really kind of talking about that, but just sees the headline like, oh, that's it. Bitcoin is on run. We got it.
600 million.
Yes.
It's like it's free money on the table, Yeah. Why wouldn't you take it?
This is a fascinating discussion, man. And I think there's like so many. I get your guys' point, right? Like when Raul Paul comes on, it's like talking like death to everything. Well, he's short on everything anyway, so it benefits him to get other people to believe that, and the market just go the opposite way.
He makes money the more viewers he has. It's exactly the same shit,
It's a little cynical. I think like when you follow people, like I hope you guys are following Layer 1, not because we're trying to push any type of narrative for you to follow us, but because we're actually pushing ideas and thoughts that we believe in. I'm sure like there's a ton of people out there that definitely do that, and maybe we'll sell out at one point, but I'm just kidding, guys. But yeah, I think dude, super fascinating discussion. We got a lot of people talking in the chat. I think this kind of struck a nerve, as well as the Steam It conversation kind of struck a nerve. I'll get to the comments here in a second. But yeah, man, super fascinating discussion. I think Maple also commented on that dollarization of other countries, saying that like if all the transactions in your country are actually like pseudo dollarized, then like at what point are you just a colony of the United States? Yeah. If like all the microtransactions happening are just people transferring like some type of stable coin USD there. So funny, interesting conversation. But dude, did you guys have anything else based on that conversation we had? I think that all great points, man.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sure you guys will have some comments about the comments in our chat. So let me get through this. Going all the way back to the Steemit discussion. 1-2 had an interesting comment. He said the winner in all of this is Ned Scott. So basically, Ned Scott, the founder of Steemit, is the winner of all of this because he got out clean. I was gonna comment on that and say, like, has he made any public comments about what's actually happening? It would help to maybe have, I'm sure he's under some type of cease and desist or like some type of
NDA.
NDA. There's no way. Let me go through this, guys. It'll take me a moment. Shun says, I don't feel bad for CZ. Without him and other exchanges, Justin could not even attempt to take over Steem. What do you think about that? Anybody?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't feel bad for CZ either. I think it was just kind of he didn't really look into the situation and made the dire mistake of trusting that Justin Sun was doing something that he was going to be okay with, and now it's blowing up in his face. So, do your own research.
Who fired the first shot? Yeah.
I believe Hive fired the first shot, right? Because they didn't want to be taken over by Justin Sun, so they were like, we're not gonna cordially do this with you. We're going to fork the network and start this, and so I guess you could call that a shot, or I don't know. Anyways, we've got whatever happens with Steemit shows that no high roller like Justin can take over chain. Ola Art saying this. Now Steemit is dead and it has a new competitor, Hive. And I think this is like a really good comment that he put out, and it's definitely like an accurate representation of maybe what comes out of all of this. So sometimes, or he said maybe more competitors in the future if it keeps forking. And I think that's what will eventually happen. Like we'll just get to the point where, okay, like Justin's forking it again on top of, the Hive fork. So now people are just forking it to get to a standard of rules that they want to apply to these other people. So I think at some point it's just going to fork until you just, you get to the point where, okay, that person's that sector of people is completely excluded from what I'm doing. And that seems like a worthy final endpoint for this event. 1-2 saying, sometimes I wonder why Warren Buffett sold Goldman Sachs stocks? ?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, did he sell all bank stocks and airline stocks? Is that what he's getting at? I wonder. I saw a funny thing on Twitter that was like, Warren Buffett sold all his airline stocks to retail because there was like a graph of Robinhood buys of airline stocks going this way and Warren Buffett sales going this way, like at the same time. So it's, I mean, I don't know. I don't see a lot of these airlines, going bankrupt. I think most will get bailed out. So maybe it'll actually work out well for retail this time. We'll see.
We've got another comment from Sean. He said, Justin lost out on this attempt. Look where Tron is on CMC. He shot himself in the foot. I think we can all agree on that statement there. Sean's also saying low interest. This is on our second topic. Low interest rates and credit defaults hurt banks badly. All big banks are interlinked with swaps. Warren should have sold earlier.
Yeah. I mean, the bigger underlying problem there is that the Fed is going to increasingly have, trouble raising rates. They tried in 2018 or 2019, and the market dumped by like 25% or something nuts. So I think that's kind of the larger problem, and that's also an argument that a lot of people use for inflation and saying that if the Fed can't raise rates and we're at this, we're at this constant kind of 0% to 1% rate, then, inflation has to happen. But, these banks, they have a lot of money. I think if anything, they're just going to kind of screw over their customers more and more until it gets to a point where they can go to the Fed, an organization that they created in the first place, and say, hey, here's the new strategy to raise rates and allow us to make money. So, if you want to bet against the most powerful corporations in the world who own the indirectly own the organization that sets the rate that allows them to make money, go for it. But it's you gotta have some cojones to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting to kind of see Warren get into more cash, especially kind of where things are with the rates and potential inflation that might be coming, which is kind of for somebody that big, to get into cash given where things are right now. Usually you would think that maybe they would start buying up assets that are cheap now, but that's not the case. So it's always interesting to see that. But Warren obviously operates quite differently. It's hard to kind of make him relatable to crypto traders or investors. He's very traditional, and he takes positions in the markets that are like 15 to 20 years. So just keeping that in mind.
Yeah, it's interesting that he kind of called himself out for essentially being wrong on airlines and dumping that stuff. That was he looked like death in that investor call. But guys, we have about 20 people. I think we peaked at 21. We've got 19 or 20 in now. So appreciate you guys hopping in the chat here and hopping in our channel. If it's your first time here, please leave a subscribe. What we're doing here on Layer1Live is talking everything news, and then we have interviews throughout the week as well as TA. And I don't know, give us a good description of Dimitri's desk. Dimitri.
Well, yeah, we cover trading analysis for BTC and alts. So we go over the sentiment analysis in terms of where different players are positioned in the market. And I do that Tuesdays and Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. So
amazing. That's a phenomenal description there. So you guys know where to find Dimitri's desk, where to find the bear. He's not always bearish. He's just kind of a term of endearment here. But if you guys are following along, please like the video as well. It helps other people find our channel, and it helps kind of grow the community that we're slowly trying to build. So that's pretty much it, man. We've got, I think Shun was saying something about deflation itself is not bad. It just slows down consumption, but it will increase savings. So kind of like a little cap there at the end of our conversation. We've got one more discussion piece before we hit Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS, and Cardano. So let's do it.
Yeah, let's roll. So I got this one. So in today's cup of tea of FUD, I got you covered. China orders second largest mining region to close, which is 9% of Bitcoin hash rate at risk. Wow, what a timing. So the halvening happened. Right now, the miners earn less in revenue, and now China is coming in and saying, "Hey, listen, one of the biggest regions where they have miners, you gotta shut this thing down." Which is like, what a timing, especially when miners are making less now than before, and we kind of talked about the miners' capitulation and so on. So basically, there was a paper came out saying that. The financial administration of the, I don't know how to pronounce this city, Sichuan?
Sichuan?
Yeah, Sichuan. There you go. Province of China has issued a notice to its subordinates, office ordering them to guide mining entities to end their mining activities in an orderly manner. I'm not sure what that orderly manner means, but they are trying to emphasize to end these things swiftly. So China, in a kind of like, they've been trying to be vocal about it, how they trying to promote blockchain, but not necessarily maybe crypto as much. They're trying to focus more on B-chain. And with this, region being forced to shut down, that's going to definitely put on pressure, obviously, on the hash. And then in the end, it's going to put pressure on Bitcoin itself. And we've kind of seen that overall miners have been kind of dumping BTC. This tweet that came out of from Joseph Young from Cointelegraph. Let me see. Saying Bitcoin break-even price for that region is near five to six people running mining centers. Say okay, so their break-even for mining BTC is between 5 and 6K, and they've been offloading actually BTC. They've been dumping more BTC than they've been, getting in rewards, which is kind of like showing you that the overall miners are, dumping, some of them dumping BTC in the market and trying to get rid of it as this is happening. The thing that also just keep in mind is that, what's going to happen, right? If this region, that's so saturated with miners, what's going to happen, once that's going to close? Well, there's obviously alternatives where they can actually move to a different place, right? There's other, kind of geolocations that are good for mining when it comes to the cost of electricity, when it comes to just kind of the the kind of the weather conditions and so on. They mentioned like Mongolia is one of them and so on, and like kind of the regulations there. So there's also a possibility that, hey, maybe it will be a chance for other regions like maybe US to get some market share, as well as we have like Texas miners coming online and so on. So maybe they can capture some of the market there. But overall, yeah, it's a little bit of a funny type of news. And, we've talked about the market consolidation in the mining sector, but I wanted to kind of hear from you guys. What do you guys think, where the miners are now, and will we see some kind of a shift where we see the miners moving, maybe not moving, but like giving up some market share to the West? And therefore, the West will have essentially quite a bit of liquidity for BTC, where US doesn't have to actually go out to, through maybe third-party brokers to access liquidity on exchanges that might not be regulated or somewhat regulated. Do you think we would have can we capture that market share and bring more liquidity for BTC as also these institutional guys are ramping up in terms of trying to get more exposure to BTC?
Yeah, I mean, so like I have two comments here. One, I think one of you dropped a link about Iran possibly getting into crypto mining and in Bitcoin in general. And I think like most of the time we think about the private sector as it comes to mining, but we don't talk about like nation state mining that could possibly, if once Bitcoin's narrative gets to a point where nation states, and they already are getting to the point where they want to get involved, that's an area where you could see like significant growth over the next, couple of years, decades, whatever. We don't talk about nation states enough when it comes to mining because not many, people are doing it now. But when you have Iran coming out and saying, hey, we want to kind of like get the ball rolling here for our government and our nation as far as crypto is concerned, I think that those areas have a chance to really pick up over the next coming years. Your point on energy is fair. I think like Mike always brings up I think it was last week that he brought up the fact that the technology that's happening within these GPU producers, where you're having these mining rigs that they can essentially control in their own area the technology that's being put out based on what they're developing in China, right? That's what you were talking about with the ant mining and things like that. If you have areas that have free energy, you can essentially take those old mining rigs and you can actually turn a profit. Whereas if you're, on a really inefficient mining rig, and you don't have free energy, you actually like we're always talking about, you're actually operating at a loss. So I think like there's a space for free in free energy areas where you can use these old mining rigs. But to Mike's point last week, you have these areas where they're going to always have the best tech and they're always going to be in front. And that's where you might see like the most percentage of mining start to, obviously be like saturate. So.
I think I just want to comment before Mike, you comment on this in regards to free energy and so on. So like a lot of miners, what they would do is they would take advantage of countries that have subsidized energy costs for their people. Obviously when you have miners coming in and they're increasing the consumption of energy, and which increases the subsidization that government has to give for that energy, it kind of becomes unfair. And it's not really good for the government because, it's not, the way it should be operating. It should be subsidizing just regular residents, people that use electricity and so on, not, to mine Bitcoin, which consumes so much energy. So that's kind of, there's that a little bit of a struggle there in a battle when miners are like trying to choose a country or like, okay, which ones are not going to, not attacking that side yet, like where can I just get into it and maybe get subsidized for some time and then dip out.
I would love to do more research on like energy production and like the amount of energy supply in certain regions, because what I've heard is like areas like Texas that have this abundant supply of natural resources and energy, that total supply of energy that's available to everyone, that's negligible. The point that you brought up is negligible because those people, you know, they're getting that energy anyways. But it's a fair point. It's a fair point.
Yeah, when I saw this story break, I saw quite a bit on Twitter that was kind of talking down the risk of any sort of larger miner dump here. You know, there were some points kind of about how the government works in China, where you have your local governments that have to kind of, you know, pitch themes or trends or narratives or whatever, right? Like essentially kind of goals that they want to work with. They have to pitch them to the CCP and you know, kind of the broader Communist Party and say, hey, this is what we're going to focus on. So, you know, perhaps some of these miners were mining illegally, or they weren't paying, you know, their taxes, or they were stealing electricity, right? I think there's that seems to be kind of the broader story as well. Anytime news comes out of China, any sort of kind of miner ban, Bitcoin ban, we've generally seen it to be FUD. I think if China is going to come out and ban Bitcoin, it's going to be pretty clear, right? Or ban mining, right? So I'm not super worried about that. If anything, it's just going to allow others to kind of move in and take up some of that hash rate essentially. But yeah, I mean, the next story we have on Bitcoin talks about this a bit as well, and kind of some of the things that the Layer1 Technologies company in Texas wants to do with some of their Bitcoin batteries and whatnot. And you know, that Texas energy point is a good one because they've seemingly, you know, come up with these Bitcoin batteries, which we can get to now if you want to move on.
Yeah, we need to send some. We need to get Dimitri to send some of his buddies to whoever started Layer1 Technologies taking our clout, man. What's up? Yeah, we can move on.
All right, cool. So yeah, this is the first of two stories here on Bitcoin. So Layer1 Technologies has essentially created what they're calling Bitcoin batteries, which are, you know, as it kind of gets at electricity storage systems to help stabilize the Texas electricity market. So, you know, there's a lot of energy that goes to waste, and because Texas is their energy consumption is so seasonal, there's, I imagine, a lot of energy that's essentially wasted. So these Bitcoin batteries are aimed at stabilizing, you know, at first local energy grids that, you know, kind of frequently suffer from these demand shocks where, you know, all of a sudden there's going to be this giant energy demand, and you know, it could eventually lead to a problem. Now you have these Bitcoin batteries that help solve that. So I think it sounds like their goal is to start in Texas. You know, obviously they're trying to create basically the largest Bitcoin miner in the US, if not in the world. You know, their goal is basically to what they're saying is repatriate 30% of Bitcoin's total hash rate back to the US. I'm not sure 30% has ever been here, so maybe patriate first, guys. But you know, that's their goal by the end of 2021. You know, if we start to see some banning of mining, quote unquote, in China, then you know, perhaps that's a bullish thing for Layer1 Technologies. You know, they also have their own proprietary ASIC chips. So, you know, alongside these Bitcoin batteries and some of the other things that they're working on when it comes to these, you know, various cooling systems and whatnot, that are gonna cut their electricity expenditure. And the fact that supposedly Texas energy costs are even cheaper than the, you know, 3 cent to 5 cent per kilowatt hour that miners pay in China, you can start to understand how this, you know, how Texas could, you know, really become a leader in this kind of new emerging, you know, commoditization of Bitcoin mining.
You know what? I wanted to just share that I used to live in Dallas for some time. I lived there for like 4 years. And the interesting thing there was, you know, these energy companies, so it's deregulated there. So you can pick like kind of, you know, whichever energy company you want to work with. And, you know, the competition there is pretty high. So what they do is they kind of have these special deals that you can get. And one of the deals, one company that released it, and I definitely got it, was like, all right, have a contract with us for a year, and you'll have weekends free. So you can use as much electricity as possible, and it's free, which is nuts, right? It's crazy. If you tell that to somebody who's mining, like, okay, I'm just gonna start turning this thing on, like, during the weekends because it's completely free. And there's another option that was if nights are free or something, because let's say you spend some time at office, you work, and then you come back home, you spend your electricity there. Well, guess what? After like 8 p.m. or so until certain other time, you can have your electricity for free. You're not going to be charged, right? But you can be charged for the rest of the time. So that was pretty crazy, because coming from the northeast side, where our energy costs are like ridiculous, it's monopolized and so on, right? There's only one company. Coming down there, it's like a whole completely different country there, and when it comes to energy, it's like so cheap, it's insane. So I just wanted to share with you guys that Texas is definitely good when it comes to the energy side. What I'm really kind of excited about, what I mentioned earlier, is just having US mine, right, through layer 1, let's say through Texas, and have that BTC for the liquidity for the US side, and then so we wouldn't have to rely so much on liquidity that comes from from the east, right? So that's going to be a very good thing overall, I think, for our side of the world, because we're going to have that, and we're going to stop relying kind of on third parties to gain exposure and gain physical Bitcoin that are from the east side. So
yeah, kind of the nationalization of assets. I never thought of nationalizing Bitcoin. That sounds kind of against the original principles there. But I would just want to cover some comments while Mike. Hopefully, Mike changes into. I don't know if you guys are listening on audio after this episode is live. Mike just got up and walked away. Hopefully, he's changing into his Pittsburgh Penguins jersey, because Crypto Pickle is in the chat. Crypto, every time you come in here, Pickle, I'm gonna bring that up. That was an amazing point. Going back to because I guess we're still on Bitcoin, like the whole thing with China banning Bitcoin miners. Like, now that I think about it, now that we continue to have these conversations, it's like, with their continuous move towards kind of adopting blockchain and adopting Bitcoin in general. Although I think they're way more Bitcoin averse than they are blockchain averse. And I don't see them moving Bitcoin miners out of the country. I think I could see them nationalizing it, right? Like, I can see them taking over to the extent that they already aren't. I don't see them losing the power of that type of hash rate in the Bitcoin that is kind of staying within that country, almost like you're talking about. I don't see them losing out by trying to ban this and have it go to some place like the U.S. or some other Western country, or even any other Eastern country. It doesn't seem to me like that's China's model going forward, where they're trying to kind of hoard these assets, even if Bitcoin might not be high up on their radar.
Yeah, and that article that I mentioned earlier, it should not be interpreted as a ban of mining, right, in China. It is simply saying that in that specific region, certain miners probably, did not pay enough, and therefore they need to
Who's
get
in
out
charge?
of it, right? Yeah, exactly. So it's not really banned, right? It's just that region, certain players are going to have to close down the shop and perhaps move to a different location and whatnot, right? Which is creating that just movement that's going on there. But at the end of the day, it's hard to know the exact thing that's happening in China, right? With many things that are going on, on that side. So
yeah, that's fair to point out. Mike, you were listening. I didn't realize you had your AirPods in, but where is the Penguins jersey?
It's up in safekeeping. I don't want to mess with trolls, man. He's probably a Caps fan or something. It's just sad,
Amazing. Well, that was a good discussion. We got guys in the chat. I think Peter Thiel backs Layer 1, correct? Not Layer 1, but Layer 1 Tech.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what 1-2 is talking about. He says, "Do you guys recall Peter Thiel, that he was making a big mining farm in Texas?" I think we literally just covered that. I think we got that discussion out of the way. It's fair to point out, I looked like briefly at natural gas production in the U.S. and like states other than Texas. Obviously, I think northwest of Texas specifically have a good natural gas production as well. So states like Colorado, Wyoming, Oklahoma, I think New Mexico was in that. They also could see growth in their state GDP from natural gas and these free different things that we've been talking about with Texas.
Yep.
So
Looks like Peter Thiel put in 50 mil to Layer 1, and then I'm not sure if that's the same Series A. They did a Series A that was valued at 200 mil. There was a variety of crypto industry leaders too. So
got it.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So just really quick, just to wrap up Bitcoin so we can move along. The last piece of news here that we have is a little bit of more fun, I guess. 50 Bitcoin that was mined in February 2009 started moving. So it's crazy how like this is some of the initial Bitcoin that was mined, and there's a bunch of speculation. It was like, who is this OG? Is it the Satoshi? Starting to dump. Is it Craig? So like there's kind of like a little bit of a worry there because once you start seeing that Bitcoin moving from way back in the day, you're not sure why it's moving now, right? Why it wasn't moving before? What is the concern there? So some people are trying to align it with certain market movements and BTC spot right now, which is kind of it's kind of a stretch, I would say. People tend to usually look for an explanation why BTC dumped, and they try to pinpoint a specific factor of it. We're like, oh, okay, this is maybe a plus token dumping. This is this dumping, right? That happening, but and I get that because a lot of people just want to hear the explanation justify the move. But at the end of the day, really, there's so many factors involved that kind of blaming or selecting one side for that move can make you seem kind of naive when you believe in it. At the end of the day, it's more sellers or buyers or vice versa. So it's I don't know how I feel about this type of news. It's interesting to see somebody started moving their BTC from way back in the day, and wonder how they're what are their plans going forward. But they held it for that long. I don't know. Maybe they just remembered the password to their wallet or something. They're like, oh, there it is.
that guy searching in the dump meme.
Where
he finally found that USB drive. Yes. But that's interesting, man. There was a ton of hubbub at first because people were like, this is Satoshi, it has to be Satoshi. And it cooled off over time. But I guess the real question here would be, would Satoshi coming back be good for Bitcoin? That's the question I asked to everybody that's actually having this discussion. It's like, and I feel like people fall on pretty split on this, maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40 from the answers that I've gotten. So what do you guys think?
What do you think, Deem?
I don't know. I mean, it's that argument where it's like, well, who's in charge? You get the face of the leader of who created this, which can kind of motivate people and create this Bitcoin nationalism. But I don't know. The way Bitcoin was designed is really meant to not have one, and from the beginning. So I don't really think Also, at the same time, by him coming out, that's going to expose put a bounty on him from maybe certain players that either trying to rob him or trying to do harm to him because they believe that he robbed them. So it's very risky, especially where Bitcoin is now, and for him to really come out and be like, yep, here I am. So
yeah, I would lean towards the bearish side of things. I mean, there's really no reason for him to move his Bitcoin unless he was looking to, transact with it or sell it, right? So if he was going to give it to somebody else, or move it to another account, like kind of get at, well, what's the point, right? And then the other side of things, if he's going to sell it, that's obviously super bearish because he's got over 1 million Bitcoin. And, other than just kind of the fundamental negative news that would bring in the anonymous founder selling out of the thing that he created, that's a ton of negative sell pressure that's going to exist now with that kind of any sort of buy pressure being wiped off as that event happens. But I don't think we ever see that. I mean, I think if that was going to happen, it would have happened already based on how much he has and how high the price has gone. So I don't think it's really something that anybody has to worry about. I mean, this seems to me to be more of of Whale Alert, that Twitter account kind of fucking up, where, they basically tweeted about it and were like, might be Satoshi's coin. So they just didn't do any research, and kind of spread some FUD there after previously doing the same thing on like another account in some way. So, I don't think there's anything to worry about when it comes to Satoshi moving his coins.
There's so many fake whale bot accounts too. People have gotten trolled hard on some of those whale bot alerts. I think I myself am a victim. So yeah, it looks like Crypto Pickle's a Bruins fan. Mike, what do you think about that?
When's the last time the Bruins won the cup? It's been a little while. I honestly don't know. It's I'm not trying to troll. It's a legit question. Let me see here. But so he's a Boston boy, huh? I'm surprised. Usually, you just focus on the Patriots, but props to you, taking on the rougher Boston teams as well. He's loyal.
And maybe Satoshi's just moving BTC to buy Ethereum for Ethereum 2.0.
There you go. That's definitely it.
Yeah, there it is. That would be the move.
Yep.
That would be the real flippening. It looks like their last Stanley Cup was in 2011. So recent. I think the Pens last run was
recent.
Was that last decade?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, when you're a Cowboys fan, man, 9 years ago is recent. All right. But
so in the last 39 years, the Bruins have won it once, and the Pens have won it 3 times.
Interesting. Well, we're gonna move topics before we get any thumbs down here from but so guys, we have I think 3 more topics. I've moved it now to Ethereum. We've got EOS as well as Cardano to finish up. So we appreciate you guys following along. If you this is your first time, we're kind of covering news from the week. So we appreciate you guys in the chat. I think we're about 16, 17 now. So it looks like Pickle's clapping back a little bit, but we're going to move on here. Just a little bit of Ethereum news. We have covered Metacartel in the past, and Metacartel is this interesting ecosystem of really eclectic individuals that are also building, mostly dApps within the Ethereum ecosystem, and they use this structure that most people are familiar with, but they've really taken it on, this DAO infrastructure where you're able to almost create guilds through blockchain technology. And you're able to have these socialized liquidity pools that can go towards different initiatives, right? So basically, Metacartel was formed out of Moloch DAO. So if you guys, I'm going to drop Metacartel in this link here because it is kind of more, I guess, in depth or a little bit more. What word am I looking for here? Dynamic is probably the word I'm looking for. So basically what's happening with Metacartel now is that they've launched out of Metacartel has come a ton of other DAOs where you're kind of creating these different dApps within Ethereum, and now they've kind of launched this DAO incubator where they'll be able to kind of help people understand how to create their own DAO, whether that's a DAO for things within crypto, whether that's a DAO for things within your local community. You can do so many things with DAOs, and I'm really getting interested in all the functionalities that DAOs allow. But they're essentially launching this DAO incubator to help people understand the positives, the negatives, whether they even have a community that would benefit from a DAO and things like that. So Metacartel is doing this DAO incubator now. That's essentially the story. What do you guys make of when I bring up Metacartel in our group discussions and on Layer1Live, what do you guys make of what they're building at Metacartel and the DAOs that have kind of evolved around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think DAOs in general have struggled, but Metacartel is a good example of somebody who's been able to, really succeed with their setup. So it's cool to see that they're running this DAO incubator setup. They've got a whole bunch of stuff going on with their Metacartel ventures as well. So typically DAOs are one of those things where, like you see with Maker, it's like, hey, we've had all these issues, we're going to create a DAO and let you guys handle it. And at least to me, it's kind of like, okay, well, that's them washing their hands of the system and of the setup and of the business. But Metacartel there is and has been an exception, it seems.
Yeah, I agree with everything what Mike said. It's definitely hard to create an active DAO, right? We've seen so many DAOs that are kind of, they're created, but the participation is low. Therefore, certain results get skewed and voting happens. They're like, you know what? We're going to stop that voting for a second here. Not enough participation, so there's many different things that have been, DAOs have been struggling with to engage the community, to incentivize them to participate, and so on. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, sounds absolutely great on paper, but in practice, there's many different issues, right? So, but Metacartel has been, doing well, and they're trying to address those issues, think about like solutions to make sure that those things, actually work. So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate what Metacartel is doing in that they're almost like changing the idea of what a DAO is, because I think, like you said, like the most known DAOs are like MakerDAO. There's the DAO within Ethereum and things like that, and it's like, I think the idea of DAOs are relatively amorphous to people. Like they really don't understand it, other than MakerDAO and like some other things. But you can have DAOs with small amounts of people. Like it doesn't have to be tied to this huge enterprise. And I think that's what Metacartel is doing, is showing that you have a group of maybe 1,000, maybe less than that. I certainly started with less than that. But what they did was they were able to kind of join in a community around cryptocurrency and around blockchain and kind of fund projects via the blockchain without having that centralized. And now we're getting on the spectrum now, right? But they're able to kind of fund projects and really involve their community through the ideas that come out of this. And I think honestly, like you take this to the nth degree, and people will eventually be able to like have DAOs for their local community school, their local community, different things where they're able to, on the blockchain, have a way to interact together and fund projects together in their local community outside of like maybe this global aspect that we're talking about now. Super interested in what Metacartel is doing. I'll also drop a link by the end of the episode. They had a talk, kind of like a meeting between kind of what they call, I guess they call their members pledgers. And they had this meeting that wasn't signed only to pledgers, but it allowed other people to join. But they broke down everything DAO. So I'll drop that, in the chat by the end of the episode. We're also gonna, possibly work with Metacartel here in the future going forward with Layer 1. We'll see what that leads to, but maybe we'll talk about more of that as we go forward. So.
Pledgers, what a name.
yeah. So they have basically they call their pledgers summoners. They take the idea of I think most. Obviously, we made the comparison between crypto users and gamers for a long time, and summoners is certainly a term that's used in gaming and guilds a lot. So they use a lot of different terms. The DAO incubator, I think, has a lot to do with monetization as well, like of the Metacartel as a whole, not just the little things. I think if you can make a DAO incubator where people are paying you to do these things, you can essentially bring in and start to pay different Metacartel contributors, and it kind of is that funding loop there. So anyways, guys, I moved this to EOS. Guys, if you want to help me out here, I don't want to talk too much. So basically, Equilibrium has launched or has partnered with 4 independent companies to strengthen their DeFi protocol. So Equilibrium essentially is EOSDT. It's just stable coin on the EOS network, and they've brought in 4 companies, and that 4 companies are Binance, EOS Finex, EOS Nation, and EOS Cannon. And these 4 companies essentially will have multi-sig access to a lot of the protocol upgrades on Equilibrium that have to do with this Equilibrium, which is the stablecoin on EOS. So basically what you'll have is more decentralization across a stablecoin that essentially right now has $10 million locked up in users' funds. So that's basically what you have. And it's a move forward, right? Like you're bringing in Binance to an ecosystem. Like if you bring in a big name like Binance and you have them participate in the governance on your network, that network is going to get more publicity. It's going to have more clout within what you're already doing on your own network, outside of your network, and it leads to the adoption of stable coins on EOS, which we haven't heard a lot about, right? We've heard a lot about these stable coins, and they're mostly on Ethereum. So this is just a move forward for decentralized finance on EOS. What do you guys think about what's going on?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how, EOS is not really picking up in terms of that stable coin on their network, because if you like take a look at it, right, compared to ETH, EOS is faster and cheaper, right? And it really comes down to that, right? So if you have a stable coin on it, then if you're moving around that stable coin, you pay less in gas fees per se, right? Mm-hmm. But that it's just like, it seems like right now it doesn't really matter, right? But it's like, when is it going to start getting, when it's going to matter? When actually the speed and the transaction fees are going to actually push people to maybe use the EOS stablecoin rather than like Ethereum based stablecoin. It's interesting that we haven't really seen that yet.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, so Equilibrium is launching EOS DT. It doesn't have anything to do with USDT. They're just, using the DT.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and it's already launched, but go ahead.
It's already launched. Okay. Yeah. Dima brings up a good point. I mean, for the longest time, USDT, right, by and far the largest stablecoin, existed on Omni. Now obviously the majority of its transactions exist on ETH, and then you have, still even a small percentage that exist on Tron. So what is holding back EOS, which, of those four is probably the fastest, and I'm not, to be honest, not sure, right? But probably a worthwhile bet to make that EOS is the fastest of those four chains. What's kind of holding EOS back from going to a lot of these exchanges who, by the way, run block producers for EOS already, and implementing EOS as an option for people to transact USDT on, versus trying to build a brand new system yourself, right? So maybe that's something that Block One looks at, or somebody within EOS looks at in the future.
Huge conversation. That just has to deal with adoption, right? Like getting users on your network so that they want to use something like EOSDT. I think that there is a utility in and of itself there. Like, let me move this faster. There might be like a user interface issue there, because in order to, at least without using any type of like, now dApps obviously can. So dApps don't have to include like gaming dApps, right? It's going to be finance dApps, can be, moving things like blocks.io lets you move EOS from one wallet to another without staking. But these are all issues that don't exist on Ethereum. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I have Ethereum, I have to pay a gas fee, yes. But I don't have to deal with the extra user interface issue of, I need to stake. Okay, what is staking? Okay, now I have to do this before I even send anything. I guess the answer to you guys' question is the question that Dimitri always literally puts in on the dashboard every time we have a new network on the podcast, right? Like, whenever we have a smart contract platform on the podcast, we're always thinking of interesting questions. It's like, okay, cool tech, how do you get the users?
Yeah.
And okay, yeah, that's the question that you guys are asking. It's just the idea of composability. The more shit that's built, the more cool shit that, is going to be able to use. And then you get more users and then funds, and then that attracts more people. It's like, what is that first thing that gets the ball rolling? But once you have composability that Ethereum, has, where it's like, I use Ethereum I use Ethereum DeFi because I can, participate in DeFi. I can do all these different things. I can participate in all these apps. I can, eventually stake. It's like, there's so many different dApps on Ethereum that composability factor is strong, whereas EOS is not as strong.
When are we going to see some enterprise stuff, man? Like, all these like platforms and networks say, hey, we're enterprise grade, like all that, and we're gonna target enterprises to use our technology and so on. But it tends to then kind of lead towards the way, okay, you know what, we're actually going to get some retail going here, and shift their focus into like, well, we're going to do this, like maybe the DeFi stuff for like the crypto community and like retail guys, rather than kind of get the enterprise side of it. Because if you think about it, like, that dollar stable coin on EOS, let's say it could be used with some business, right, that, let's say, transfers money between, I don't know, regions or whatnot, right? It's cheaper, it's faster, like, it's great, right? Why don't they do something like this? We see like Ripple is doing some, international transfers of MoneyGram and all, they're kind of been pioneering that. Why isn't the EOS or some, others are like doing something similar where they can have, a setup like this where it's cheaper, faster, and like, secure and all that stuff be done in the background with the enterprise, where like, forget about the users, right? Forget about the like retail guys that are like, you have to do staking, all this stuff, right? But if the retail side doesn't see all that stuff in the background that the business is doing, all the back end, and they're saving a lot of money, that is really the route. And like, we haven't really seen anyone do that.
I mean, that's a fair question, right? Like, you guys were making the same point about institutions with Bitcoin, but it's like most transactions and all of these things occur on retail side. So like, until crypto gets to a point where that actually is the norm, people won't care. Institutions are just getting familiar with Bitcoin. How the hell are they going to make it to EOS? I know that's a super like broad answer, but it's just, you can't bring in the enterprise that's only just getting familiar with Bitcoin. It just, it's tough.
Nor why would they ever use a public market that's controlled by cryptocurrency exchanges in China? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Like the enterprise piece, I think, will always exist on enterprise specific blockchains.
You can have a private chain on EOS and it be an enterprise specific blockchain though.
So when you have issues, who do you contact? Versus Hyperledger, who has a giant customer support team, right? Like,
that's fair.
It doesn't make sense, right? Like, why, if you don't have any users, what's the point of creating a stable? Like, I get it, right? Like, you're trying to build things to attract more users. You're trying to bring in more users who are going to build things. But it's tough, man. It's tough. ETH's doing a lot of good things, and everybody's building. But it's definitely tough when ETH has that head start.
Yeah. I think in general, like, I just revert back to composability, right? Like, if there were really cool DeFi apps on EOS already, and like there was a plethora of these, people would be more apt to use EOS DT, which would then like, it would be like a ball rolling downhill, right? Like, so now more people are using EOS DT, market cap's going up, more people are familiar with it. Like, it's just, where do you start? And it's like anything.
It's a chicken and the egg problem.
Yeah.
Like, why am I going to use a DeFi platform that doesn't have any users? The whole point of DeFi being cool is that you can do the same things that you can with CeFi, but in a decentralized manner. So even if you have all the DeFi, if you have the exact same things that you have on ETH, what's the incentive for people to switch from ETH to EOS?
Yeah. And then you go to the utility of, well, I don't have to pay any fees. Well, if you can get used to what's happening on staking, and I think there's some people in the chat now. One Pickle's talking about Vigor. I like what they're doing with governance on Vigor. Vigor's a stable coin on EOS as well. So there's multiple stable coins on EOS. Liquid Apps is another team that's doing really good stuff. I'm infinitely grateful from like being an EOS holder and being involved in that ecosystem of the work both Liquid Apps and EOS Nation are doing. I think those two entities are doing like a ton in one, pushing inter-blockchain connectivity like they're talking about. If you could connect EOS to Bitcoin in a fashion that's usable, then you might be able to, have more adoption in that sense. I think inter-blockchain connectivity is like way more like abstract than we think it is. I'm not an IBC guy, you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't get that deep in that tech, but I think it's way more abstract, and it could bring more to a chain than we think. Like, oh, it's just connecting Bitcoin to EOS, or to many different chains. I think it goes deeper than that, or else Liquid Apps wouldn't be working on it. That's my guess. They have really smart devs there, and it's like there's a lot of good stuff going on there. So yeah, man, I'm interested to see what happens with the DApp network and in Liquid Apps. So we appreciate you bringing that up. It's interesting that
Nice.
It's interesting that 1.2 brings Wax and Tops up that next. That is the next article.
How did he know?
I don't know. I gave him access. I'm joking. I did not give him access.
Yeah, you know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you know it's weird. Yeah, I got logged out of my account here on my sheet, so I don't know if he logged in. He signed me out. I have to sign back in.
Actually, you know what it is? I have, guys, every time we do these episodes, I have the full list of what we're doing in the description. So I'm sure 1.2 saw the description there and saw everything that we're looking at. So anyways, guys, yeah, Garbage Pail Kids, this is more of an NFT section. And honestly, like, Wax is obviously like a fork of EOS here, the EOS IO Tech at least. So it's under EOS, but it's Wax. This Wax marketplace, or this Wax NFT marketplace, obviously is booming, with the addition of Garbage Pail Kids. So obviously Wax has done this really good job. The founders and the team have this really, I think, good connection just from their time in like the traditional tech space. They've obviously partnered with Tops, which produces Garbage Pail Kids. They had that partnership in some form or fashion with Disney. There's a couple others, right, that they pushed out, and that's allowed, for example, Garbage Pail Kids to be produced into an NFT, to these digital cards, to be produced as an NFT on the Wax network and be bought and sold. So essentially what happened here, guys, is there was a sale of unopened packs of cards from the Wax or the Tops team. Garbage Pail Kids were obviously super popular in the 80s. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of these, but they're essentially like any type of collectible cards. Yeah, they're ridiculous, but they have a huge community of collectible enthusiasts that trade these traditionally physical cards, right? Like you trade them just like you would Magic or Pokemon or anything like that. Well, essentially what Wax is doing is partnering with Tops to bring these cards to the blockchain, right? Or into Wax. I guess digitize it at all, right? Like there wasn't any centralized, digital card before this either. So they're essentially bringing, these Garbage Pail Kids digital for the first time, and also having the added capability of being on the blockchain so that they own it, yada, 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 the spiel. But essentially these single pack and max pack cards sold out within 24 hours. So you had basically this rush of people trying to buy these packs. They already have this added utility of like you kind of want to open these cards as collectibles. So you had a ton of YouTube people come and stream like unopenings of these packs for other people. So you and obviously, like any Pokemon collectible guy knows, sometimes you open this pack and get nothing. Sometimes you get the golden highlighted Charizard, so like
I saw that.
Yeah. So, you saw that too? Yeah, that video is fun. So essentially what happens is you had this run on Garbage Pail Kids cards, guys, and they were for people that were speculating, right? Like, and there's this big speculation around whether this can be a small thing. It's not a huge thing in the grand scheme of things, but a small thing of bringing non-crypto users into crypto to buy these digital Garbage Pail Kids that usually they only have physical versions of. Wax does a great job. They have Wax Cloud Wallet. So you don't even have, it looks like a regular sign up. I've done everything to do with this Cloud Wallet. And until you get to a certain step, you don't even need like the private key management and all these things. So they make it pretty easy for onboarding. So this is just the NFT, story. They're selling, on the secondary marketplace now. I know a ton of people made 4-5x their return. Wax Tops is actually rolled out this thing where purchasers of the collectible packs, 100 random golden cards went out to those people. So now you have this added, functionality of if you buy a pack, you may get this valuable golden card. For those that aren't collectors, I know this was a spiel. If you're a collector or you're interested in NFTs or making money, and you're trying to speculate on cards, this just shows that there is a place for these NFTs, and we'll see what happens with traditional maybe collectors cards. Maybe Pokemon gets involved, maybe Magic eventually gets involved. Who knows? But there's a space for this in the cryptocurrency industry, and it was cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. Congrats to Wax there. I'm sure that's something they've been working on for a while. So very cool. And yeah, some good interest. Like you said, they're selling out in under 24 hours. So that is big. I've got the last story here with Cardano. So, Cardano is not usually a project that kind of pops up in the news cycle, if you will, but some interesting news here. Essentially, as Cardano has done really well over the past few weeks, they're up something like 20%. And have the Shelley upgrade on the horizon, which I think we talked about previously. It's essentially their own move to a proof of stake network. It'll be interesting to see if they get there first or if ETH gets there first. Both are very slow moving, kind of a lot of research papers from Cardano and not a ton of actual, deliverables. But along that line, Charles Hoskinson, essentially the founder of Cardano, went on some sort of interview and was talking about some of the work that they're doing at the blockchain lab at the University of Wyoming. And essentially what he said was that they're working on a cash-like experience for crypto via this crypto native microchip that the first use case would exist with supply chains, right? So blockchain technology has been very beneficial to a lot of various supply chains because it can act as kind of this, really great use case for like an RFID tag, where of all of the various counterfeit goods that exist in the world today, theoretically, blockchain tech could really cheaply and easily help eliminate those issues for various manufacturers and various resellers. So one of the problems that Cardano and Hoskinson have seen is that there are no current chips on the market that have, a really kind of easy integration with cryptographic keys or crypto in general, right? And any of the various cryptographic technologies that are being used for RFID. So he is supposedly working on a chip that will, essentially start by exploring some of these supply chain use cases and see how perhaps it could fit, into Cardano's roadmap. He even brings up a good point as well, talking about how something along the lines of 98% of people in Africa still don't have a smartphone. So when you, bring them a new, decentralized cryptocurrency and it's all digital, you actually run into some of the same issues that they have today, where those 2% of people who have smartphones, who are already those that are, maybe kind of higher up in a social hierarchy, they now have control of everybody's funds. And instead of kind of banking the unbanked, you kind of end up further banking them, if you will, via this new solution. So it's a good article. You guys can see it there in the description, and some interesting news as Cardano, like I said, has really started to kind of make some mainstream news, and obviously the price has done well there too. So
is Cardano actually live? Is Mainnet live?
I don't know, to be honest. I know they've had so many iterations and so many different white papers. I think some version of a mainnet is live, but it's a constant process for them for sure. I've never been a Cardano holder myself. Never been a huge fan. Never kind of seen the narrative with them. But who knows? Yeah, things could happen.
No, it's definitely good to get updates from Cardano. One day they'll launch, that's for sure. So that's the episode. We had a great time. Hopefully you guys had a great time following along. I want to get to some comments, guys, and if you had any closing comments before we drop off here, we'll do that. So let me get to some comments real quick. Crypto Pickle said he saw the title, so I guess in the description or the title, Dimitri, that was where they found it. So you're good. You didn't get hacked. Nothing happened there. Shun said staking to use the network is a disadvantage. Managing RAM, CPU, net, too complicated. So that's about that EOS adoption. Crypto Pickle said he bought a $5 pack and opened it, so he bought a standard pack. Now they sell for 70-ish on the secondary market, so unopened packs are going for a definite multiple on the secondary market. He also said William Quigley, the founder of Wax, works at Disney, so that's where you see the partnerships coming from. Let's see. NFTs could be big for USIO. I believe there's a DEX for NFTs. Yeah, boom. That's pretty much it from the comments. I did have a one little Easter egg about Wax. I guess wax paper is like what either the cards are coated in or the cover. Some type of thing that has to do with collectibles is the reason why Wax is even called Wax. I had no idea. So I guess they were really targeting this collectible niche all the way around from the actual genesis of the company. So really cool little Easter egg there. Guys, we'll be having Dimitri's desk this week. I'm sure he'll get to the shill here in a second. We'll have, I believe, Ava Labs. Is that who we have this week? We have Komodo at the end of the week, as well as another Dimitri's desk. And if you guys need anything as far as like access to our Telegram group, please leave us a comment. I believe there's a join link in our description as well for our public group that isn't our private group, but you can possibly get in contact with us there. Other than that, what kind of closing comments do you guys got?
So Dimitri's desk tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. Join me there. We're going to cover TA and then take a look at any updates and as far as the sentiment goes and options, derivatives, futures, and so on. So you guys can kind of see how, where BTC is now and how other players are positioning themselves ahead of the directional move that we're anticipating for BTC. So come chat, bring your bags. We can chart them out.
Bring your bags. I love it. Yeah. Happy Memorial Day to everybody celebrating out there. It's about beer o'clock over here. It's about 3 p.m. our time. So we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.